Okay, so here we are looking at example 1 with our negative exponents. So our directions are to simplify, and we just learned last video that expressions are not simplified if they have negative exponents, so we need to deal with those. So here we go. So the first thing I'm noticing here is that I have y to the negative third on the top and x to the negative second on the bottom. So now don't be confused. That 5 and that 20, those pieces are not attached to that y and that x. They do not have the exponent of negative 3 and negative 2 like the x and the y do, or the y and the x. So we can actually look at those pieces separately. So we can look at this as 5 times y to the negative third divided by 20 times x to the negative 2. And again, that makes sense because we know that when there's no operation in between a number and a variable, that we can assume that it is multiplication. So if I'm looking at my 5 and my 20, I'm thinking, and you always want to watch out for those numbers. Each of those can be simplified or can be divided by 5 to kind of reduce it. So 5 divided by 5 is just 1. I don't need to write that. 20 divided by 5 is 4. So I do have a 4 on the bottom of that fraction. So now, next, that y to the negative third, we need to make that negative 3 exponent become a positive. And in order to do that, we need to change its placement. That y to the negative 3 is on the top of the fraction now. So to make it positive, I'm going to go ahead and move that to the bottom of the fraction. So 4y to the positive 3 on the bottom. And now the x is just going to go to the opposite side also. The x to the negative squared, or negative 2 right now, is on the bottom of the fraction. So in order to make that positive, we're going to take that x and bring it up to the top and make that exponent positive instead of negative. So watch out, make sure you're simplifying those numbers also. Make sure you simplify the coefficients. You like that vocab there? If I was doing vocab with Mrs. Garrick, I'd get a Jolly Rancher. Make sure you simplify the coefficients, or those numbers, in case you don't remember what a coefficient is. All right, so there's that first example. Let's take a look at the second one. So this one is a little weird because it's not a fraction to begin with. But remember, I can turn anything into a fraction by putting it over 1. So this one's a little tricky because I have a lot of different pieces here. So 4 to the negative 2, that definitely has a negative exponent, and I don't want negative exponents. So 4 to the negative 2 is on the top of the fraction. So to make that positive, that 4 to the negative 2 power needs to get moved to the bottom of the fraction. So 4 squared. And again, remember, when I move it, that's what causes it to change from a negative to a positive. Now, my x. Remember, this x is not attached to that y. It does not have the same exponent as the y because there are no parentheses there. That x has an exponent of 1, and it can stay on the top because it's positive. My y has an exponent of negative 3. It's on the top right now, so that needs to get moved to the bottom so it can be positive. But I have another y right next to it. That y needs to stay on the top because it's positive and I don't want to move it. If I were to move that y down to the bottom, it would become a negative, and that would completely defeat the purpose of me trying to simplify this. Oh, and this last little piece, look at me, I'm so tricky. This last little piece, x being raised to the 0 power. This is something you never want to get this wrong. Make sure you plug this in your calculator to double check it. Anything, something, pick a number, 4, 15, put it into the 0 power and see what it gets you. X to the 0 power is really just 1. So that piece just entirely goes away because xy times 1 is just xy because we don't need to, nothing changes when we multiply by 1. Okay, but now we're not finished simplifying because I have some y's that I can cancel out, right? If I have one y on the top here and y cubed on the bottom, that would be, y times y times y. One set of those y's would cancel out, leaving me with two y's being multiplied on the bottom of that fraction, or y squared. And 4 squared I can do to get 16. And on the top, remember I canceled my y out, so I'm just left with x. Shoop, shoop, shoop. That got a little messy there, those two examples. Not too bad. Okay, good stuff. Moving on.